Lambeau Field,
Fenway Park,
the Rose Bowl, the athletic venues that stand as great monuments and landmarks in our sports landscape. This hour on Yahoo Sports Radio, we take you from coast to coast to the most famous stadiums and arenas in all of sports. Stadiums USA Radio.
In-depth conversation focusing on the popular venues across the sports globe, from the pros to the minor leagues to college.
The latest news in stadium design, renovations, and stadium connections to their communities. Your host, Bill Hazen, talks with athletes, coaches, authors, and newsmakers who share their experiences and connections to the most storied structures and stadiums in all of sports.
The conversation is now.
Broadcasting from Stadiums USA headquarters in Chicago, here's the man who was behind the mic, detailing Michael Jordan's entry into the NBA. And now, he is your official stadium guy, with your ticket to the latest stadium news and information. Here he is, Bill Hazen.
There are very few more exciting broadcasters who have ever worked in the profession than our next guest. And I happened to catch him at an early stage of his career when he was the voice of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Oscar Robertson with the ball, brings it over the 10-second line. He wheels it back onto the left, gets it back from John McLaughlin, down into the hole to Lou. Turn around, skyhook from 6, it's good!
Eddie Doucette, the winner of the 2013 Kurt Gowdy Memorial Award. He is a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, and perhaps the best part of this is that he retains a great association with the Hall through all of these years. Many of you have heard his voice and know him well. So, Eddie, the first thing I want to ask you is, and I think the audience would want to know, is how are you doing?
Doing great, Bill. Doing great living out here in San Diego. I've lived in California for many years now. The weather has made me feel a lot younger than I really am. And so, thanks for asking. Doing well. Well,
I'll tell you, a lot of people will be very glad to hear that, and they will remember that voice of yours the instant that they hear it. A very, very recognizable voice and a lot of enthusiasm. What is the source of the tremendous and very legitimate enthusiasm that you bring to your broadcasts? Eddie, where does that come from?
Well, I think, as I mentioned when I was at the Hall of Fame, when I won the Gowdy Award in 2013, and I had a chance to get up and speak, it was an emotional delivery for me because sports broadcasting is something that I wanted to get into since I was age 10. And I was first introduced to broadcasting per se when I was a youngster growing up in Boston and an ardent Red Sox fan, and of course Gowdy was the guy. I got a chance to hear his voice along with a couple of others that were very distinguishable voices at the time, and decided that this is what I wanted to do. And I've been working at it ever since. And it is an ongoing process. It is an ongoing effort in trying to hone skills. But when I got into it, no one was going to give me a chance at doing the sports thing. I had an opportunity. My parents moved out to the Chicago area when I was a sophomore in high school at Evanston High School, and my dad had a TV show in Chicago. It was a cooking show. Eddie Doucette was a chef, and he was on TV on NBC and knew a lot of people in the business. And one day I asked him to introduce me to Jack Brickhouse, and he did. And from that point on, I established a relationship with Jack. And when I was in college, I used to talk to Jack, and Jack would helped me by getting me a little tiny booth up there in Wrigley Field. I'd carry that big old woolen sack tape recorder down there. That was bigger than I was. Those things were huge, and I'd put that up there and I'd broadcast into the tape and couldn't wait to get back home to listen to it, to correct and critique myself. And that time still had a heavy Eastern accent, still have a little, but most of it is gone. I know how to pronounce R now. It's no more 4, it's 4, and it's butter and not butter. Enthusiasm has always been there. There has been a distinguishable passion that I've had for broadcasting that has been ongoing. And interesting you brought that up, because the other night I sat next to Dale Brown, who was Shaquille O'Neal's college coach.
Oh, my.
And we were at the dinner, so last Sunday night, in fact, in Houston. And he said to me, "Eddie, I could hear it in your voice. You still have the passion. tell me about how this all started. So I gave him, this resume of this career that I'd had since age 10 with the wishes and the hopes and the frustrations and the vagaries of the business. And he said, it's amazing. Well, I got home and I got 3 emails from Dale Brown within 2 days after I had dinner with him, expressing how he felt about the passion that I had and how integral this is to anybody's success.
Eddie, we cover the stadium beat here. I want to start with Milwaukee Arena, which today is known as the Panther Arena. As you know, UWM plays in there. Tell us about this building and the closeness of it. What made it such a special place?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. I think the closeness of it is what made it a special place. You were there to see a basketball game. You were right up close. You were so close you could see the sweat on the players' faces. The building itself was old. It was antiquated, but it had a feeling about it. It was the building that I used to call it the old barn. I said, boy, they're rattling the old barn tonight. I can just see the rust falling from the beams. It was a way of trying to describe the movement in the building and the jumping and the cheering and the foot stomping and whatnot. It was just one of those buildings where everything reverberated. A building that was just a hair less than 11,000 seat capacity. Of course, you can't get an NBA building unless you have 18.5 now. And, of course, that removes it a little bit. I'm at the, not to digress, but I'm at the Final Four, and we're sitting up in the Hall of Fame suite, and we're watching the game on the big screen because there are 72,000 people there, and we're so far away you can't see the floor.
Yeah.
Well, that's not part of the fun. But, yeah, that was a good one. The Boston Garden was another place, that great old mausoleum of a building. And we'd get to the game early, 2.5 hours before the game, and I'm up. You sit up in a perch there. So I'm up going to my seat to get some last-minute work done before heading back to a floor to do an interview. And I was so early that the king rat was in the hallway, and I'm walking to where I'm going, and I hate rats. And this rat's this thing was as big as a cat. And I froze, and he saw me freeze, and he froze. Now we got a classic stare down going for it seemed like it was about 15 minutes. It was probably 2.5. And it was a difficult day for me because I'm so fearful of rats, and this thing was big. And I had a box of popcorn in my hand. That wasn't good. This fool was looking at me like, I'm going to get you, boy. Finally, he walked away, and I went to where I had to go. But I tell you what, it was a difficult day. The laundryman will know how tough that day was.
Oh, but you know what, Eddie? Those rats weren't afraid at Boston Garden either. I can tell you that.
So if you went in there and you saw a herd of cats there, that was the first tip, right? You knew they let those cats loose for a reason. That was not good. To get into some of the other spots that I've been, baseball, I can remember going down to old Busch Stadium in St. Louis and doing a game when Harry Caray and Jack Buck were the announcers in the next booth, and it was the hottest I have ever been in a ballpark. It was stifling hot. You couldn't breathe. Mm-hmm. I got into the game, and I started getting a little faint. And I looked over to the next booth, and I looked at Caray and Buck, and these guys are a lot older than I am at that time. And I looked at both of them are sitting there in their undershorts. I said, wow, this is pretty good. These guys have got a short sleeve shirt on and underwear, undershorts, boxers, and I'm up here with a shirt and tie. That was Busch Stadium. There was another evening that I had a football deal. I was doing a playoff game up at Mile High Stadium in Denver, and I was doing it for the old Mutual Network at the time, and I had been drinking a lot of hot chocolate because it was so cold. You want to get your goosebumps retread. That was the night. And I'm sitting up there, I'm drinking this hot chocolate. I got to halftime. I've got to go relieve myself. Well, there is no press box that you're in. You're up there with the general public, and they're not going to think too kindly. You've got a couple of big bozos up there that have been overserved, and they're waiting in line to do the same thing that I'm doing. So I got to wait patiently for these guys to finish before I can get to what I have to do. By the time I got back, the color man had to start the second half, And boy, I get reamed out on that one. But you know what? There was no turning around on that game. So there are three examples: basketball, football, baseball, great old venerable venues. Every one of those, you know, Mile High gone, Busch gone, Boston Garden gone. I had another one at Griffith Stadium when Ted Williams was a manager. That was another one of those nights where you worked out of a pillbox for a press box, and I remembered my episode earlier in the season in St. Louis, and that was the night I decided to go to the shorts. It was so hot.
Eddie, you live in a very interesting city now in San Diego, and a city that does not really have an NBA-level arena, and they've paid for that. They've lost NBA teams that have been there, lost two of them, as a matter of fact. Can you take us through that, and do you see the day in the future where this will change?
I can take you through what I know about it, and it goes back to a conversation I had with David Stern when he was the commissioner. There was a lot of interest in putting a franchise here. In fact, when I first moved out here in 1979, I commuted back and forth to do the Bucks games for the next 4 or 5 years. I ran into a couple of businessmen who approached me and said, we want to bring a franchise into town. One of them was the creator of Jack in the Box restaurants, who I had eventually told them that they needed to contact David and kind of put them in touch with one another. And nothing ever came out of it because the basic problem was the arena is incapable of housing an NBA team. It is a very poor facility. It was the old San Diego Arena then. There was no way that you could put skyboxes in there, luxury suites, whatever you want to call them. Locker rooms are just very subpar. You cannot believe that this would be a facility that NBA teams would want to play in. They've had numerous problems with the floor there. In fact, they had to cancel the floor there this year. The Lakers have always come down here and played an exhibition game preseason, and the floor was inadequate. So they're in the process of getting a new floor. They've talked to our company, Horner Flooring, and I think that could be happening. But does that bode well for the future? I don't think so, Bill. I think that what they would prefer to do would bring an NBA team into Anaheim. And the reason for that is the corporate base up there is much stronger. The corporations that support these franchises, they cover these humongous salaries, which are way out of hand. But the only people that can afford to pay that or pay for that are these corporations. And then, of course, the steady increases that they add on to the season ticket holders. I think that Anaheim is much more capable of doing that. I know they've had a lot of discussions with them. I don't particularly see a chance in the near future that San Diego will have an NBA franchise. That's my own personal opinion.
Eddie, I want to be the last person in America to offer a hearty congratulations to you on the Hall of Fame. I realize I'm coming in a little late on this, but if you'll forgive me, I want to give you my very best wishes. It's great to visit with you, and I know our audience has really enjoyed it. May I wish you all the best for the future?
Well, you certainly can, and thank you for congratulating me on the award that I received from the Hall of Fame, the Curt Gowdy Award, who is really my initial inspiration.
Oh, yeah.
Get into the broadcast business.